Hello everybody, it is me, the one, the only, Divine Iconoclast. And today, we are going to be reviewing the Bloodbath album, The Arrow of Satan is Drawn. Now, a bit of history on the band Bloodbath. They are a Swedish death metal supergroup, and the original idea around them was it was a bunch of people from Swedish death metal bands who wanted to form a supergroup together to honor the traditional 90s Swedish death metal sound, and basically pay tribute to it because it's a huge influence on them. I don't know everybody who was in there. I know that there was someone from Cataclysm in the band at first, and also Michael Ackerfeld of Opeth was the vocalist. I don't know if he played a guitar in that band too, but I know for sure he did vocals. And they released their first EP in 2000, their first full-length in 2002, and then Michael Ackerfeld promptly left the band after the first album. After that, Peter Tagtren came in of Hypocrisy. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but a bunch of umlauts and weird placed vowels and consonants. I don't speak Swedish and I don't know Swedish names, so I'm just going to say Peter Tagtren. That's how I've always said it. He went in and he made an absolute classic all-time album called Nightmares Made Flesh. It's my favorite death metal album of all time. I love it. I cannot understate how much I love that album. It's freaking amazing. Fantastic album. And then Michael Ackerfeld came back for one more album, and then he quit doing death metal after that. This in Opeth and in that album and in Bloodbath, and it's whatever. I'm only a little salty about that because Michael Ackerfeld is really, really good at death growls, and I also liked Opeth infinitely better whenever they had death metal influence in them. I don't like them too much nowadays. They're not horrible though. But anyways, it's about Bloodbath. And then after that, they got Nick Holmes in on vocals, and I'm pretty sure the rest of the lineup was also revolving. I could be wrong though, but I think this band is essentially like a revolving door band. And Nick Holmes is also on this new album here, making him the only Bloodbath singer to be on 2 consecutive full-length albums, and the band has been around for 18 years. I think that's really funny. So essentially this is a Swedish death metal supergroup. By the way, I should mention Nick Holmes, for you guys who don't know, is the dude from Paradise Lost, lead singer from that band, one of my favorite doom metal bands. I really, really like Paradise Lost. But yeah, on to the new Bloodbath album, The Arrow of Satan is Drawn. Is it any good? I'm here to report, yeah, it's pretty good. I like it a lot. It does have a traditional 90s Swedish death metal sound to it, but it's probably the least Swedish death metal influenced album out of any of the ones that Bloodbath has released. They have strayed away from that path quite a bit since their first EP, which was heavily influenced by it, but I think this album has the least influence of it, although you can still obviously tell that they're going for the 90s Swedish death metal style, but this time they're putting their own spin on it like they always have before, but I think this time it's a bit more of their own modern day death metal production spin on it, and I think the album's overall better for it. I think it doesn't sound so much as someone trying to copy a genre as much as it does them paying homage and inventing it on their own, which I very much enjoy. The production on this thing is also fan-fucking-tastic. Amazing production on this album. Some of the best in all of death metal that I've heard this year and of all time. The guitars are awesome. They're heavy. They're just amazing. The drums are punchy, and the cymbals, everything sound awesome. My one complaint is the bass drum could be a bit louder, but I don't care. Either that's not even, I don't even take that into consideration, or I'm considering the score of this album, because everything else is produced so well. You can also actually hear the bass all the time. You can hear the bass. I'm really happy about that. I wish more bands had audio where you can hear and understand what the bass is doing, because the bass is important in metal, and people oftentimes just forget about the bass because guitar players overshadow them, which I don't know. I'm not in agreement with that. I think bass players should have their own time to shine. And the vocals are also really, really well produced. There's no weird production. There's no weird production stuff about them. The mixing is a little off on the album. I feel like the guitars are a little bit too loud, and therefore everything else is a little bit too quiet. But again, I don't honestly care that much. It's not a huge complaint for me. I still very much enjoyed this. The performances on this album are also fan-freaking-tastic. The guitars are tight. They're locked in with the beat. I never see them falling out of the beat. They always seem completely in time and locked in with one another. The drums are constantly, keeping the beat. And they always have the right drum fill for the right time. There's some fantastic drum fills on here, and the drumming's very unique and creative on this album. I very much enjoyed the drumming on here. And the bass, even though most of the time it just copies what the guitar does, it still seems like it's pretty tightly played. The bass player is doing good. The only issue I have, and I know this is going to get me a decent amount of hate, because I know this is basically like divided the Bloodbath fan base, from what I've seen in YouTube comment sections, is that I don't think that Nick Holmes is a very good fit for this band. And I understand that's a pretty unpopular opinion, but I honestly think it's the truth. I think his death metal growls fit great in Paradise Lost whenever they don't need to be ultra heavy and they can just exist as more like a texture kind of thing. You know, they're heavy growls for texture rather than for heaviness, because Paradise Lost in and of itself doesn't need to be all that heavy. It's not the main focus of the band. However, Bloodbath, it's trying to be heavy first and foremost, and his vocals do not fit the music in my opinion. I think he is by far the weakest vocalist that Bloodbath has had. I wish Peter Tägtgren would get back on here, or Michael Ackerfeld if he would stop being a pussy and do death growls again. Or anybody. I don't know. If you can get someone on here, preferably someone who's Swedish, because this is a Swedish death metal tribute band. It was made by all Swedes originally. Also, for you guys who don't know, Nick Holmes is English and not Swedish. I don't know if anyone else in the band is still Swedish, because I don't know the rest of the lineup. But yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like Nick Holmes is the best fit for the band. It's not awful, though. It isn't like it ruins the album or anything. I think he's an average vocalist, and I think that Bloodbath deserves much better than an average vocalist, because this is not average music. I think the thing that I love most about this album is the riffs. The guitar riffs are amazing. They're diverse. They range from tremolo-picked power chords to full chords, you know, like full-on sweeping minor chord triads and stuff like that. And then there's also a lot of groovy riffs, you know, which is pretty stereotypical of Swedish death metal, the groove, low riffs. I'm pretty sure it's also in C standard tuning, which was the usual tuning that bands like Entombed and Dismembered used at the time. The riff writing on this album is fantastic. I cannot exclaim that enough. Some of the best riffs I've heard all year in death metal. Every single track is also packed to the brim with riffs. They're all super dense. Like, each song has probably close to 15 or 20 riffs in them. Maybe not that many in all songs, but a lot of songs have that many, especially on the song Blood Aside. It sounds like a schizophrenic, like a schizophrenic nightmare, or like a schizophrenic episode that someone's having, but like in a good way, how death metal should be written, in my humble opinion, in a linear kind of like schizophrenic pattern to where you're never quite comfortable with the song, because if you get comfortable with death metal, it starts to get boring. Death metal's at its best whenever it's uncomfortable, it's keeping you on guard, off your rocker, and you're constantly experiencing new things. In my humble opinion, that is. And that's the kind of death metal I enjoy. I feel like if you get locked down into one setting during death metal, not as enjoyable as this kind of schizophrenic or just, you know, just all over the place kind of writing where nothing seems to make sense, but it's all the better for it, because everything in context with each other like melds together to make this fantastic, like, I don't know, cacophony of death metal perfection. And maybe not perfection, but death metal mastery. You can tell that everyone in this band is experienced. You can tell this is a super group by all the writing and stuff like that. It's amazing how heavy this album can be sometimes as well. It's heavy as balls. It's so kick-ass. Listening to this album, every single song you'll be headbanging to it will be like, yeah, this is awesome. This is how death metal should be, in my opinion. Heavy, technical sometimes as well. It definitely shines, definitely like goes into the technical aspects, both in drumming with several interesting and intricate fills along with the guitar solos on here, and some even like fast tapping riffs, I believe I heard on one point of the album. But this is how death metal should be. If someone said, hey, how should death metal sound, I would play them this album. The songwriting is also fantastic, if you hadn't already gotten that from what I've said before. The ability for this band to have such a fine line between just having noise and just a straight shot through that doesn't make any sense, compared to a cacophony of sound that makes sense in context with each other, and that is still like a straight shot through. But whenever I say that, I mean it doesn't like ever repeat itself. You know, it's just like straight on through, doesn't have time to look back in the past, hits you, every single riff hits you over and over again, harder and harder than the riff before, and it eventually all culminates into death metal magic. I am in love with this album. This is the best thing Bloodbath has put out since my favorite album of theirs and my favorite death metal album of all time, Nightmares Made Flesh. It's incredible. I cannot explain the virtues of this enough. This is probably my favorite album that I've reviewed all year. I also really liked how there was some experimentation on this album too. Not too much, but hints here or there was a bit of experimentation with a bit more of like a melodic kind of rhythm going in parts of the songs, like melodic intros, along with the full chords I was mentioning before. Those are pretty atypical in death metal, to strum through entire minor chords and stuff like that. That's more of something you'll find in black metal. But I thought it was really interesting. Also, the song Fleischman, the intro song, is very creative. And although it is kind of an intro track, it didn't feel like it. I very much enjoyed the intro track, Fleischman. It's just amazing. And it also has a bit of odd time signature. I believe there's a time in one of the songs where it was in 5/4 time, or maybe it was at 9/8. I don't remember. But I really liked how it wasn't all in just 4/4 or 6/8 the entire time. Overall, this is a fucking amazing album. Bloodbath has delivered once again as being a decently, albeit not maybe a consistent death metal band, but I always know what to expect from them. And this time, they just way over the mark. They delivered probably the best possible album they could with this current lineup here. I just wish they had a different vocalist. In all honesty, I think Nick Holmes' average vocals bring down the album from maybe being a 10 out of 10 to, well, a 9 out of 10, which is what this album is. Yeah, my favorite songs in this thing are Fleischman, Blood Aside, which is the stupidest song name ever. I started laughing whenever I saw that. Morbid Antichrist, Levitator, March of the Crucifiers. Those are my favorite songs, and the worst song on here is called Only the Dead Survive, and it's just not as good as the other ones. It's not awful, though. I could see it as, like, me liking it more on another album, but compared to everything on this album, it's just not that great. And like I said, this album's getting a 9 out of 10 from me. Amazing, fantastic album. Make sure to put down in the comment section why I'm wrong and that Bloodbath sucks, because a lot of people don't like Bloodbath, and I'm not quite sure why, but, I mean, it's whatever. People like what they like. People won't like what they won't like. It's whatever. Or make sure to tell me down in the comment section that I'm wrong and that this is a 10 out of 10 and every Bloodbath album is, and the Bloodbath is the best death metal band of all time. And, like, you're almost right. I think that there's maybe a couple bands that are better than them. Like maybe Nile I like more than Bloodbath, or Dying Fetus maybe. But overall, I love Bloodbath. Or you can do the correct thing and validate my opinions down in the comment section and say that I'm correct in everything that I said. And all of my favorite songs that I chose are the best ones, and the worst song that I chose was the worst one. And if you do something like that, well then, I'll be very happy, and thank you a lot for doing that. It means a lot to me that you would listen to me, and that you also made it this far in the video. Thank you for that. Anyways, Bloodbath, the arrow of Satan is drawn. 9 out of 10. Hail Satan.